Good morning, everyone. This is Andrew on day 12 of the 500K challenge to go live on Facebook for 30 days to raise money for my flipping and investing real estate business. Today, I just thought I would riff a little bit on my experience. My first property that I bought, my baby, it was a horrible experience. To say the least. As many people do, I did tons of reading for a year or so, and then finally decided that I needed to take action. And I was so excited to get into my first property. And I ended up getting a HELOC on my Toronto house and was able to basically buy cash. And I saw this amazing property. It had been on the market for a little while, and it had five rented units. It was a house that was actually a boarding house, and at the time I didn't know what that meant, so I'll tell you a little bit about that. But it had 8 units in total, some in the basement, which I didn't end up using because the ceilings were really low and I didn't feel like occupying them because of just weren't that very good. Anyway, so I jumped at it. It had $2,200 of rents among the 5 bedrooms, and I thought, wow, and it was $150. I'm like, that blows the 1% rule out of the water. For those of you that don't know, the 1% rule is your rents should be 1% of the purchase price, which just essentially means that you're going to cash flow okay. Anyway, so I bought the property, and when I went for a tour, there was this one guy in the lower unit, and he was sort of the mayor of the house. And at the time I didn't really think about it, but as it turns out, that guy was kind of the glue that held everything together, and that's why we called him the mayor. So a couple months in, he ends up telling me that he's moving out with his girlfriend, and so that unit became vacant. And that was the beginning of the end. That unit took 6 months to fill, and it was filled with sort of the best tenant we could find, and he was a handful. All the while, the rest of the house was kind of going to shit. Mostly because of one tenant. This guy was a recovering addict. This house was full of interesting characters, and I bought it fully tenanted, thinking that was a good move. Little lesson is for me is that I only take vacant properties. I like to place my own tenants. You never know what you're getting, and especially if someone's trying to sell a property, they could fill up the unit with just anybody, just to say that it's occupied and say these are the numbers, So that's something to consider. Anyway, so this one tenant, he lapsed, started doing drugs and drinking, stopped paying rent. He was on OSD, I think it was called, which is sort of a welfare type thing, a work program. I was getting checks directly from the government, and I thought that was amazing. But then they stopped because he stopped reporting to his social worker, or whatever term that would be. He stopped reporting. They stopped paying directly, so now he had to pay. He wasn't getting the payments from them, and he stopped paying rent, and he owed me several months. And finally I filed for eviction, and the reason I delayed an eviction is because eviction, it costs you, I think it was something like $175 to actually file, and his rent was only $300. So I really wanted to sort of suss out the situation to make sure this wasn't just a random occurrence, because if I spend $175 to be able to file for eviction and then he pays me the next month, then I've just wasted $175. So anyway, ended up having to go to court, It took 3 months to get a court date, and finally I got the court date. It took another month to get the sheriff in to remove him, and at this point, I mean, this guy stayed right to the very end when the sheriff actually came into the house and removed him. I couldn't rent that room out to save my life, and he also left me with a parting gift. About a month later, the tenants said, "There's something in this house," and I didn't quite understand what that meant until they sent me pictures of bed bugs. So his parting gift to me was a big bed bug fuck you. So then I got exterminators in, and if you've ever had bed bugs, I can tell you a little more about my experience if you want to ask specific questions. But I don't see the comments here, so if you're commenting, I apologize. Oh, now I've done it. Anyway, bed bugs are a nightmare. So you have to put these little pads under the feet of all the beds, put bed liners on. You have to bag all your clothes, and even if you do laundry, you have to put them back in the bag and seal the bag. So you're essentially living out of garbage bags. You have to seal the pillows, you have to clean the whole house, and these guys were not clean at all. And they're also, I mean, the highest rent was, I think, $450 a month. So they're not rolling in cash. So when I'm saying they have to buy bed liners and do all this stuff, they weren't willing to do it. So if I wanted to get rid of the bed bugs, and I provided all the bed liners, and then, you know, they wouldn't put them on, or they wouldn't bag their clothes. So some of the guys were following the rules and some of the guys weren't following their rules. Anyway, it ended up taking a year to fully get all the bed bugs out. And during this time, I actually also had to ask another tenant to leave because the exterminators that were working with me said he had so much stuff that there was just too many places for them to hide. So I ended up having to offer him cash for keys to leave. So now I'm down to 3 tenants. The whole experience was very troubling for obviously the people that were living there, and I would regularly get emails to my property manager stating if this wasn't fixed soon, we're gonna sue you through the landlord tenant tribunals. And of course, I was doing everything. I was paying out cash to these exterminators, trying different things. I even investigated bed bug sniffing dogs. Anyway, the whole experience was quite troubling, and I was that landlord that got to the point that said enough is enough, I want to sell. The problem is that I couldn't sell a house that had bed bugs, and I also couldn't sell a house that had just recently gotten rid of them. So I had to wait until they were gone, and then wait about 6 months or so to make sure they weren't coming back. And then finally I put it up for sale, and the house was in such bad shape because of the tenants had just essentially stopped cleaning, stopped caring. I mean, they have to live in it, but for some reason I guess they thought that was a FU to me. So anyway, I put it up for sale, and I found that all the offers were for vacant possession, and they were, wanted all the tenants out and were going to do renovations, and I was getting really low offers. So I thought, if tenants are going to have to leave anyway, perhaps I try one more kick at the can and offer them all cash for keys. So all in all, I paid almost $5,000 to kick everybody out of that house. And I think, they benefited from not having to live in that situation, and they got $1,000 in their pocket. But it actually benefited me because I had a great experience. I mean, it wasn't great, but it was a hell of a learning experience. And I was able to go into that property and clean it up, renovate it, and rent it out to a nice family and get excellent cash flow. And I've never had a problem since. And that was a couple years ago since I've done that. So all in all, my first property was a hell of a ride, and it took me 2 years to stabilize that property. But looking back, nothing really scares me anymore. And for my first experience, I mean, I've had problems in that some landlords have never had in their entire career. But I'm glad I went through these issues because now I know what's possible, and how you can overcome. And that's what real estate investing, it's a big part of it. Is one of my mentors has a catchphrase of problems or profits, and it's just a matter of navigating those problems, and there will be profits. I will say one thing to cap this off is that reserve funds and cash flow is extremely important, because at certain points I was having to support this property, but I knew that the investment was worth holding on to. It was a good house in a good neighborhood. It just so happened to have been set up sort of poorly from the get-go. So the appreciation on that house has been doubled in the past 4 years, and I have now a cash flowing tenant. So it was well worth the wait. But if I had not had access to cash, credit lines, and so on and so forth, it could have very well sank me. So let that be the lesson from all this. You can get through it, just make sure you have the funds to do so. Anyway, guys and girls, thanks so much for joining. Until tomorrow, this is Andrew. Enjoy your day.